Welcome back to the Intel here on ENCA. Let's continue our discussion on nuclear energy and government's plan to procure 2,500 megawatts of electricity, nuclear electricity over the coming years. We are told actually the time frames that we're looking at, and my panelists will correct me if I'm wrong, we're looking at about 2030 thereabouts that this will start coming on stream. Liz McDaid from OUTA. So there's a key question that keeps coming up, and I think I heard David Nicholls from Necsa in a way posing it, not directly, but in a way raising it. The issue of base load capacity that people such as yourselves and, those that, sometimes can be unflatteringly labeled as the green lobby or the anti-nuclear lobby cannot answer. Base load capacity. Do you really foresee, and in the context of what Prof. Mamphweli just said about some of the initiatives that are slowly coming on stream to the energy grid, if you minus nuclear, do you really foresee a situation where we can sustain baseload capacity in the evenings around this time, purely based on renewables, gas, storage, etc.?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the problem is that we're in a new era. We're changing technologies. And in the past, we relied on a single power station to run sort of as much as it could, 24 hours a day to kind of keep power to the grid for 24 hours a day. But it's like having a factory that goes 24 hours a day. It doesn't mean that every worker in the factory has to work 24 hours a day. And so I think it's the investment in the grid upgrade that is now starting to be discussed. And I'm sure that the Prof can talk more to this kind of stuff, but that's what I think us in the good governance lobby, I would say, want to see is a system that's reliable at least cost. And we don't think that's nuclear at all. And I think you have to be real here. We really do. Sorry to listen to it, but it's important to sit in the real world. During the time of COVID, the DMRE allocated approximately R1 billion to Necsa and left 45,000 households without electricity. And we saw on the news yesterday how our residents, I think it was of Soweto, were saying, give us electricity or we're not going to vote. So, we need to be looking at where is the money going and what should it be going to. And we just don't think that nuclear is a good investment.
David Nicholls, so from what I picked up from your opening comments, you seem to have, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, you seem to have a preference for modular reactors, which is what the IRP 2019 mentions. Now, one of the people I spoke to a few weeks ago was saying we should actually go with a technology that's tried and tested, set up a power station, a nuclear power station, Koeberg being an example. It has served us well, according to that particular person that I was talking to, that we may end up with a situation where we go for novelty, but in the end, it doesn't address the issues we have. Why do you favor modular reactors over a big power plant?
I don't think I actually said that, and if I did, I was not correct. A personal view, and I must be careful, this is not Necsa or the government, personal view is that the Western Cape is desperately short of stable power supplies. It currently is fed by a 1,500 kilometre power line feeding about 4,000 megawatts into the Western Cape. And therefore there is a very great logic for Koeberg to be extended or Tastebod to be built upon with, let's say, 2 more machines similar to Koeberg, funded through the PPA, exactly as the IPPs are, limited sovereign guarantees, as the IPPs have them, just on a policy issue and to confirm the PPO will get paid. And the indications using the actual cost of capital for those projects shows they are coming in at below R1 a unit if they're properly managed, and that is very credible. I do believe we should be looking at small modular reactors. There are 2 or 3 in the world that are actually starting up now, so they're not unproven. But I think that you've got to separate out that there is the potential to meet the needs of the coastal provinces that have no power, and to pick up on the the small modular reactors to be potentially a future solution to meet the needs to replace the coal fleet in Mpumalanga. Because if we don't do that, we're going to end up with Mpumalanga having no real industry left in Mpumalanga. But if I may, I'll pick up a couple of comments. The 24/7, the baseload discussion is fundamental. Society lives on power 24/7. The light that is lighting up your face, SABC is paying about R2 or R3 a unit, of which 40 cents is for the price of energy, and the balance, something like R2, is the capacity to make sure it works when you want it. The trouble with the 100 megawatts IPP program, which is great if it works, but the problem is going to be that everyone's going to put in PV or wind, and they're going to still look to somebody to provide that backup. And the trouble is that we have correlation between failures. In other words, the sun goes down at the same time all over the country. Neil, damn it. Okay, it's an hour earlier in Durban than Cape Town, but it's essentially the same time. Unless your power cable goes to India or to Brazil, PV does not meet the evening peak and the morning peak requirements. And you can say that gas is the bridging solution, but we have no gas, and gas is absolutely a fossil fuel. It has a carbon emission, it has an emissions threat somewhat greater in many ways than coal, primarily because of the methane, which is 84 times worse. And if you leak any of the gas, which you reckon about 3 to 5% leak rate is quite normal, then you end up with worse climate change issues than you do with coal. So the answer to the question is, do we want an industrialized country that runs power 24/7 to meet the needs of society, or do we not? And what we're losing over the next 15 years or so is an enormous amount of that baseload power. We've seen from the performance of the Eskom coal stations, they've come to the end of their lives. It is not a question of, it'd be nice if they could run longer. They're dying on their feet, as we've seen.
In fact,
thank you. That's my quick comments on it.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, there, Mr. Nicholls, from what I recall, earlier on figures that were cited were somewhere between 10,000 and 15,000 of capacity that we will lose, primarily through decommissioning of the older power stations in the fleet. And Prof. Mamphweli, then, having heard what you've heard now from Mr. Nicholls, what do you say? I mean, do we want to be an industrialized country that provides power 24/7, or do we not? And that whole question of base load capacity, it all comes back to base load. I should be able to switch on the lights and they come on, and other industries should be able to run their machines at night if they want to, not be constrained.
Absolutely. We really need base load, what we call base load, what everybody calls base load. But in 2016, the CSIR published a study where they actually argued that South Africa does not necessarily have a base load. Our load varies, and that variability can also be dealt with by renewable energy. Now, let me, talk to these issues of base load from the renewable energy point of view. People say that solar PV or CSP may not provide base load. So CSP, we all know that it is dispatchable, so it can provide base load. So we can peg that. When it comes to solar PV, what we have noticed from studies that were done by the International Energy Agency and ourselves and other researchers, such as the CSIR, is that the cost of storage, especially lithium-ion battery storage and storage like that, is going down. And most countries are starting to implement big battery storage systems. So that can provide us with dispatchable power. The other aspect that I need to, which is basically a myth that one needs to deal with, is the variability of renewable energy. South Africa is too vast. It's too diverse. So when you think of wind energy, for instance, there is no single minute that wind is not blowing in South Africa somewhere. There are places that have got very high wind velocity. There are places with low wind velocity. What we have done, and we've published a study on this at Stellenbosch University, we are conducting a study that is looking at the siting of renewable energy technologies, solar and wind, for grid support. which basically means that instead of locating all the solar energy projects in the Northern Cape and all that, you look at where else can we then locate these projects in a manner that they can provide support to the grid. That study is continuing, but we have published some results so far. The issue of modular reactors, I've followed the reports from the international energy agencies. You cannot, rely on two installations that say a technology is proven. South Africa does not have money. We need to go out there and raise money, even if it's IPPs that are coming into the picture. Those IPPs, they need to reach financial close. And for them to reach financial close, they need to go out into the market and get the money. Now, the modular reactors, most financial providers have not yet considered them as a technology that is proven that has got low risk. They still consider them as high risk. In developed countries, yes, it may work, but not in our situation. I don't think it can work in our situation.
All right, we've started the conversation. Unfortunately, I'm completely out of time, but I am happy that we have started the conversation. There's still a leg and a build-up to the request for proposals, the tender being issued at the end of this financial year, and I do imagine that we'll be back assembling in one form or another to take the conversation forward. I've got to thank all of you for joining me. That's Liz McDaid from OUTA, as well as Professor Sampson Mamphweli, who is from the University of Stellenbosch, as well as David Nicholls from Necsa, they were taking part in that conversation around nuclear energy in the wake of what the decision has been, which was in the wake of what the path seems to be in as far as the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy is concerned around this matter. Let's bring back one of our guests from earlier on then, the DDG for Nuclear Energy at the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, to just react very briefly to what he has heard. So having heard what you've heard, Mr. Mbambo, I say to you, if in 10, 15 years' time, we are in a situation where, this whole deal is riddled with corruption, and the procurement that we are doing is looking more and more like Medupi and Gusile. The technology is proving to be unreliable, shoddy workmanship. Will be well within our rights to hold you responsible. Are you prepared for that as the person who will be leading this particular project?
Thank you very much, Mr. Smelane and the panelists. Quite an insightful discussion and very constructive inputs that have come through. Clearly, I think it's very important that there is a recognition that the IRP has already cautioned that post-2030, we're going to decommission 24,100 megawatts of coal-fired power, which is our base load that we require. In that respect, then the IRP instructed that we should start immediately with the preparation for base load clean energy technologies that must be deployed in order to mitigate that risk post-2030 when we decommission the coal. And so the start with the nuclear program is perfectly aligned with that instruction that comes from the IRP. And to fill up that gap requires that we accelerate the pace at which we're going to deploy clean energy technologies.
I hear you. I'm out of time. I need you to say you are willing to put your neck on the line, on the block for this, because that's the only, I imagine, the measure of confidence that you have, that you will do this and you will do it properly. We will hold you responsible as the man who's leading right now if it goes wrong. Are you prepared for that?
Look, as a department, we're committed to do our due diligence in terms of implementing this program. And it goes across to all different programs of the department in as far as making sure that we provide a sustainable solution to the country for an energy that is needed to drive our economy.
Right. Mr. Mbambo, thank you. I've got to thank you for your time. I'm completely out of time. That was Zizamele Mbambo, who's from the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, where he's DDG, responsible for nuclear energy.